Hello and welcome to episode number 46 of the Rollo and Slappy Show. Today is July 3rd, 2017. I am Rollo McFlugel, and with me is Slappy Jones 2, and we are both of McFlugel.com. The show notes page for this episode is McFlugel.com/46, where you'll find links to subscribe to the podcast, like us on Facebook and Twitter and all that good stuff. So I'm going to hand it over to Slappy, and he's going to introduce our episode topic as well as our guest.
Yeah, thank you, Rollo. Today is an episode we've been looking forward to for a long time. We have a special guest with us, Vivek Raj. He's a medical resident right now. He's been involved with Bitcoin for the last 4 years. He's done some work for Fee in the Daily Signal, and he's really an expert in Bitcoin, and we haven't talked about Bitcoin yet, and it's something important to libertarians. And we brought Vivek on to explain what Bitcoin is, because most people hear about it. Maybe they see it in the news. No one really knows what it is. They think it's somehow just wrapped up in drugs or something. So first of all, thank you for joining us, Vivek. And why don't you explain what Bitcoin is to someone who has never heard of Bitcoin?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me. The simplest way of explaining what Bitcoin is it's a digital currency, but what distinguishes it from all digital currencies, because really, if you think about it, most currencies these days are digital. Most dollars, euros, yen, whatever, rupees are digital. They're numbers in a bank's computer. But what distinguishes Bitcoin and all of the spin-offs from Bitcoin, like Ethereum and Litecoin and the thousands of other altcoins that exist, is that they're built upon a protocol that is decentralized, which means that there's no single actor in control of how the system works. It's essentially like, I guess, the internet of money is what some people call it. No single person controls the internet, and yet the network comes together and functions in a way such that anybody can send an email to one another. We can use various applications. Bitcoin is essentially the monetary equivalent of that. So I guess being decentralized is obviously the main distinguishing factor. It wasn't created like brand new out of whole cloth. The inventor of Bitcoin, his name was Satoshi Nakamoto, an anonymous individual. Nobody's ever met him. He's only communicated via message board posts and emails. He didn't create the Bitcoin from scratch. He built it upon a lot of prior work. So previous to him, there was this movement that really started in, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s, called the cypherpunk movement. And these are a group of I guess you could say anarchist, libertarian. I don't really know what their specific political leanings were, but their general goals were something that I guess your typical libertarian could agree with. It was to kind of create systems, technological systems that were outside of the control of governments. So in this vein, there were many projects. For example, PGP is a P2P communication protocol that ensures your privacy. So that came out of the cypherpunk movement. And then there were numerous predecessors to Bitcoin where they were attempting to create digital cash that had no central authority. So one of them was created by a guy named Wei Dai, who I think was a professor at the University of Washington. If I'm correct, I could be wrong there. And he created a system called B-Money. There's a British computer scientist named Adam Back who created Hashcash. Another guy named Nick Szabo created a system called BitGold. So when Satoshi built Bitcoin, he kind of incorporated elements from all these, added a couple things in addition, and it's by far the most successful attempt at a free market money system.
Quick question for you then. Mm-hmm. You're saying this Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin. We know how a central bank works, and I mean, most Americans don't really know how it works, but they know they get their money from they get their Federal Reserve notes from the Federal Reserve Bank, or they go to their bank and get cash and they trade it. Who is creating the actual Bitcoins if it's not centralized?
Okay. So we're familiar in our society with the central bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, or other countries they have like the central bank of England, or the European Central Bank, and so forth. Bitcoin, it's an open source software program, kind of like Linux, right? So we all know Linux. You can open if you can read programming languages or whatever. You can read Linux's source code, and similarly, Bitcoin source code is open source. So if you go to GitHub is a website that if you're not in the computer world, where open source software projects host their repository for the code. So if you go to github.com/Bitcoin, I think that's where you can read the code yourself, and anybody can examine the code for flaws, bugs. Anybody can replicate the code. They can modify it in computer speak. It's called forking the project. If you make your own spin-off and change like something here and there, it's called forking it. And all the altcoins are forks of Bitcoin.
Oh.
Yeah, so anybody can read the code right now. Obviously, you would have to have some proficiency in the computer science language, but I mean that's true of millions of people around the world. They can read.
So then another question. So if it's open source, could someone go in and edit it? Like, what if I wanted to go in and just say, now I have 1 million Bitcoin?
Oh, okay. So the open source means that you can read it. So that repository on GitHub, which I presume you're referring to, only like 5 people right now have actual commit access.
Okay.
So the version of Bitcoin that 90-something% of people run, the actual implementation is run by an organization called Bitcoin Core. It's a group of like 100 or some odd people who have, over the past 8 years, so Bitcoin was launched on January 3rd, 2009. That was the first day of Bitcoin. Over the past 8 years, there's been basically a loose coalition of contributors, and like any group of contributors, the really top quality scientists have developed a reputation over those years. And so about 5 of them have the actual commit access to the repository. You can look up their names. Like the chief committer, his name is Vladimir. He works at MIT, or they're the sponsoring institution for him. But it's about 100 or so people. Now, when you make a commit to the repository, it doesn't send out to everybody. Every once in a while, Bitcoin Core announces the release of a new version of Bitcoin. So right now they're on like version 0.14.3, which is obviously 0.1. Right. So it's like the 14th major release was the last major release. When they announce it and they release it, and anybody can, if you don't like it, if you think, oh man, this new version is garbage, you don't have to upgrade.
Now, if you don't upgrade, are you still, this again may be a silly question, but say I'm using version 13 and I have X number of Bitcoin, can I trade with you if you have 14, or are we now on separate currencies?
Absolutely. So one of the things that Bitcoin Core, and I say specifically about Bitcoin Core because there are alternative implementations where the development teams do not hold this value as in high regard. Bitcoin Core has always been committed to backwards compatibility, meaning that if you run an older version of Bitcoin, they are very cognizant of the fact that they want new versions of Bitcoin to be compatible with old versions of Bitcoin in case you do not agree with new updates to the protocol. And it's actually kind of a debate in the community right now. Because there's 2 ways that you can upgrade Bitcoin. You can push out updates to the Bitcoin protocol that are called soft forks, which are basically new rules added to the Bitcoin protocol where they're backwards compatible. The other possibility is called a hard fork, which are not backwards compatible. And some people within the cryptocurrency community think that hard forks are the way to go. But Bitcoin Core has tended to take the position that soft forks are preferable.
So
does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So if I was to buy Bitcoin, I keep hearing about this blockchain. It gets logged into the blockchain.
Yes.
And I also understand that the blockchain is some really fascinating technology. It's very powerful, and there's a lot we can do with the blockchain. Can you explain a blockchain to someone who has never heard of a blockchain?
Sure. And there's a lot of what I call blockchain bullshit floating around there. A blockchain can do a lot, but it's not like you want to use it for a lot.
Okay.
So what the blockchain is so I was saying that we all have all the nodes in the Bitcoin network are running this software. Most people are running the Bitcoin Core software. let me back up a little bit and
Sure.
get eventually to the point of what the blockchain is. So the purpose of using any kind of blockchain-based currency, Bitcoin or otherwise, is for censorship resistance. Because there's certain activities that we all know the government doesn't want us to do, right? They don't want us to be able to buy drugs. They don't want us to, prostitution, online gambling. They don't want you to, be able to transfer money through, whatever the black
they want to
market
get
purposes that we
they want to get a piece of everything.
Exactly. So the way the Bitcoin network works around this is instead of sending money from one person to another, like when I send if I send you $10 on PayPal, what I'm doing is I'm sending a message to PayPal, take $10 out of my account and put $10 in Slappy's account or Rollo's account. You know what I mean? It's very direct.
Yep.
The way Bitcoin gets around that is instead of sending money directly to one person, when I send a Bitcoin from me to you, I'm actually broadcasting a message to the entire network. And I'm saying, take one Bitcoin out of my account and give it to their account. And the whole network has to come to consensus on this message. So that's what Bitcoin is blockchain. It's everybody coming to consensus. And in Bitcoin, it is set to be on average every 10 minutes. The network comes to consensus over what the current state of all the ledger of transactions is. That's what the blockchain is. It's a ledger of transactions. Now the way that is, so I broadcast the message to the entire network, and the nodes in the Bitcoin network pass this message around. And then there's particular nodes in the network, and they're called miners. So they receive this message, and what they do is every 10 minutes they're racing to solve this basically a cryptographic puzzle. And every 10 minutes, it's a puzzle that is purely solved by brute force. There's no cleverness to it. There's no intelligence. Basically, it's a reflection of how much computing power they devote to that problem. And so remember I said that system Hashcash that the British computer scientist Adam Back invented? That was his contribution. And so we call it system proof of work. It's called proof of work. So the miners compete to solve this puzzle. And the reward for solving this puzzle before everybody else is the newly minted Bitcoins are given to them. So when Bitcoin initially came out in January 3rd, 2009, for approximately the first 4 years, that reward was 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes.
Wow.
Yes.
So wait, now
wow.
Back it up a little bit, because I mean, you're saying proof of work and there's miners. Really what they were doing. So say this was back in 2009, I could basically set up my laptop and that would be enough power to mine a Bitcoin, or am I talking about rooms of computers to supply power for this?
Yeah, back in 2009, probably in 2010, you could probably mine that on your computer. Starting in about 2010, you have your typical CPU, you could do it. So I think it was early 2010, GPUs, so graphical processing units, the kind of high-end chips that people use in video games, right. I'm not really a computer gamer, but the high-end chips that people use to play stuff like World of Warcraft and advanced graphics, they started using that. So essentially it became so that kind of marked the beginning of an arms race where people started getting more and more powerful computer chips. So it went from like CPU chips to GPUs, and then eventually what hit the market were ASICs, ASIC. And these are computer chips specifically designed for mining Bitcoins. They don't do anything else but mining Bitcoins. Yeah. So now Bitcoin mining has become a specialized industry. And in addition to needing specialized computer chips, you also have to tend to have access to cheap electricity, which most of us don't have. But in China, the government subsidizes electricity. So as a consequence, a lot of Bitcoin mining has localized to China. Not 100%, but a large contingent of mining has moved there. So like I was saying, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, is the difficulty in mining as a result of more competition, and there's a lot more people, or does it become more difficult to mine as more Bitcoin is mined?
Because of more people are mining.
Okay.
Yeah. because more people are mining. So there is a variable called the difficulty of the network, which resets approximately every 2 weeks based upon how much mining power has been devoted. And as you can expect, if you go to blockchain.info/charts, you can look at a chart of Bitcoin difficulty, and it's progressively, it's been actually, I could almost say exponentially increasing over time, because so much more power has been just over time been devoted towards mining Bitcoin. So yeah, like I was saying, initially about the first 4 years, you got 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. Then it halved. So approximately every 4 years, there's an event called a halvening, where the reward for Bitcoin cuts in half. So it went from 50 to 25, and then last summer we celebrated the second halvening, or cut to 12.5 Bitcoins every 10 minutes.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's primarily how the miners are compensated. Because obviously, as you can expect, they're spending a lot of money on the computer chips, these AC computer chips, and then a lot of money on energy to mine these Bitcoins. It's intensely competitive.
I'm sure. Now, do they expect that? I mean, will it eventually not be worth mining anymore, or is there a limited amount of Bitcoin out there? How does that work?
So as I was saying, the Bitcoin mining is happening. So we're approaching. That's how we approach the 21 million number. You see what I mean? It's like an asymptotic curve where it was increasing the supply, but it's slowing down.
Right.
Now, you're asking about the difficulty, right? Or you're saying, how? Okay, so
I'm just saying. So say, say it's 40 years from now. Will people still be mining Bitcoin, or will we have exhausted Bitcoin, or will it get to a point where it's halved so many times that it's like you're spending so much energy to get one Bitcoin out that it's not worth doing anymore?
Yeah, I guess
so
what's the incentive of continuing to give your computing power to the network?
Okay,
if
well,
there's no Bitcoin.
the Bitcoin price has gone up. I mean, back when Bitcoin was 50, when you had 50 Bitcoins for every 10 minutes, what was the price back then? Like $15, maybe?
Yeah, if that, right?
Yeah. So what does that come out to? Like 50, like maybe $750, and then that was 12.5 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. But a Bitcoin is 2,000. What is it right now?
$2,500 or so.
Yeah, 2570 on my phone. So obviously that's more. So because there's more reward, there's more miners competing. But also mining, it's important to understand. Are you familiar with the concept of perfect competition?
In a general sense?
In economics?
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So mining, because mining has essentially no government instituted barrier to entry, what you expect is that the profit margins of miners will tend to be zero. So if mining is profitable, more miners will enter the market, and that will increase the difficulty of mining, and it will push the profit margin down of each individual miner. On the contrary side, if mining is not profitable because there's too many miners, some miners will go out of business, and then it will become more profitable. It'll always approximate about zero profit. Yeah, so it's kind of what how mining is theorized to work, and I think it has roughly approximated that reality. I don't think mining is extremely competitive, and I don't think his mining operations. I mean, there's companies like Bitfury is a prominent one. They're from like Eastern Europe or maybe like Ukraine or somewhere in that region. There's Antpool. You can look up the names of these prominent mining farms, but I don't think they're that profitable. The mining reward is one source of the revenue. They also have one additional revenue, which is tips. When you send a Bitcoin transaction, you're broadcasting to the network. If you want to be included in the very next block, or one of the earlier blocks, it helps to pay a little tip to the miners. So that sometimes you can add a little tip on. In fact, in the early days of Bitcoin, the first several years, you didn't need to include a tip. The mining reward was enough incentive for them.
Right.
But what's happened now is because Bitcoin has become so much more popular and the value has increased, you now need, the fees have gone up. So people now tipping is actually catching up as a source of revenue for miners.
Well, that's pretty neat because you can, if you say you have a very important transaction you want to make, you can put that in the front of the line.
In the queue, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so
right now, yeah. I think Bitcoin tips now average somewhere between $3 and $5. And to me, so this is you might have heard a lot about this Bitcoin civil war, quote unquote. This is kind of what it's over. One side is really upset that the price of being included in the Bitcoin, including a transaction in the blockchain, is going up. But to me, that's to be expected. It's first of all, it's correlated with the price going up. And secondly, these tips also help to secure the network as the block reward is diminishing. It's halving every 4 years. So to me, it's kind of necessary. That's my personal opinion about it. Mm-hmm. So that system's called proof of work. And what these miners are doing, not just including transactions in the blockchain, is they're in effect securing the blockchain against attack. And that's what's happening, is so much energy and so much computing power is being devoted to securing this blockchain and entering these transactions in, that's what protects it against the government attacking it, the mining power, in essence. Yeah.
So how would someone attack the blockchain? I know there's I always hear things about like the 51% attack. Is that something that's...
Yes. So that's the most well-known. I haven't honestly thought through every single angle of attack that they could do.
Right.
But the 51% attack would be essentially the government attempting to have 51% of the mining power. So they'd have to, in essence, in perpetuity, devote enough energy and mining power, and also constantly upgrade their mining facilities in order to control 51% of the network. But remember, this would only do a very limited number of stuff. What it would essentially do is they would be able to block transactions from being included into the blockchain. So if I send a transaction to the Bitcoin network, they could block it from being by saying, hey, we control 51% of the network. We're not going to mine it. Mm-hmm. We'll never include it into a block. And I guess that's one thing they could do. Another thing they could do is they could try doing what's called a double spend, where if they own some Bitcoins and they have 51% of the mining power, what they could do is they could send a transaction twice to like two different people. It basically spend the same dollar.
So
twice,
yeah. So if I had
if
I had 51% of the power on the network and I had one Bitcoin, I could send one to you and one to Rollo, even though I only had one.
Yeah. So eventually that conflict would resolve itself. But what they would do is, in the meanwhile, they could fool a vendor.
Right.
That system that would not persist long term, because ultimately only one of those transactions can be included in the blockchain, because otherwise there will be a conflict. The blockchain won't reconcile properly.
Right. And if a private actor wanted to do the 51% attack, wouldn't that kind of almost be self-defeating? Because if he just controlled the network, it loses all confidence in it. So Bitcoin would basically lose all its value, right?
Yeah, it probably would. Yeah, there would be no economic scenario under which it's profitable for a private actor to do a 51% attack. But I also think it's kind of a useless attack angle, because it has to be kept up in perpetuity, and it can't really do that much. You can't steal anybody's Bitcoins because you have to have what's called their private key. So Bitcoin, another aspect of Bitcoin that it relies on is called public private key cryptography. The way I like to analogize this is it's like your public key is like, this is a form of cryptography that's existed for decades. It's nothing new. Your public key is like the address to your house, and your private key is like the actual key that you use to open your door. So if you have somebody's public key, you can, when I ask you to, hey, send me some Bitcoin, what I do is I show you my public key, and so you have my address, and then you scan it. It's typically the form of a QR code or a 20-digit alphanumeric address. You scan it, you send Bitcoins there. It's like the address. Anybody can scan it and send money there. But to access the money at that that public key, you have to have the private key. So miners in this 51% tax scenario, they still can't steal anybody's money because they don't have anybody's private keys.
Oh,
Follow
okay.
me?
I was kind of under the impression that they could almost rewrite the blockchain, but that doesn't.
No, they can't
Okay,
rewrite the
okay.
blockchain. They can try double spend. All they can do is really double spend and block transactions. That's about
Gotcha.
it.
Okay.
Yeah. So when miners every 10 minutes, they have this block of transactions. They've accepted all these transactions, they've accepted the tips, and then they beat all the other miners to solving that cryptographic puzzle. What they've essentially done is they've created a block of transactions, and then they distribute it amongst the network. And if their block outpaces all of the other competing miners' blocks, it's accepted into the blockchain. So that's what the blockchain is. It's a chain of blocks of transactions.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they distribute this blockchain around the network, and the Bitcoin nodes, which any one of us, you and I can run a node, I run a node, these nodes validate the transactions, they validate the new blocks. In essence, they guarantee the validity of that block of transactions. They maintain the blockchain integrity. So nodes run by the people that hold Bitcoins is another very important component of the system.
So does anyone who owns Bitcoin also have a node? Or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. So the safest way to transact in Bitcoin is to have your own node. But to own a node means to download the blockchain and to, as you know, transactions and blocks are passed around, to verify those. Right now, the Bitcoin blockchain is about, last I checked, like 120 gigabytes in size. So you have to download a 120 gigabyte file, and then you also have to, you're connected to your peers in the network. Have you ever used BitTorrent?
Yes.
To download something, yeah. So you're seeing the people,
Yep.
and you're also receiving files from them. It's kind of like that. It can be a bandwidth intensive affair. And then also requires storage space on your laptop. When you download the Bitcoin Core software, you're running a node.
Okay.
So miners are a specific type of node. They're nodes that are attempting to earn the block reward. A lot of people run nodes, but they don't want to earn the block reward. They don't want to mine. They just want to validate transactions. So you don't have to use a node. Some people now use what we call basically light clients that connect to a node run by somebody else. So, for example, I have a Bitcoin wallet on my phone, it's called Copay, and it's a wallet created by a company called BitPay, which is based in Atlanta. And so when I use the Copay wallet on my phone, I'm not running my own Bitcoin node on my phone. I'm connecting to their node. So I'm, in essence, trusting them to validate the validity, the integrity of transactions on my behalf. I'm trusting them. They can't steal. Now, this particular wallet, they can't steal my money because they don't have access to my private keys.
Right.
In other words, the private keys are only kept locally on my phone.
Okay.
But as far as sending or receiving transactions, I am basically outsourcing the running of a node to BitPay. So not everybody. So to answer your question, not everybody runs a node. Some people just run purely light clients, but a lot of people run nodes because they want to contribute to the network and because they also want that additional layer of security where they value the transactions themselves. Follow me? Yeah. I know it's a little complex, to take it all in at once. But yeah.
It's all making sense though.
Absolutely. So as the Bitcoin value increases, like I say, more miners enter the market, and then you have more hashing power, which is the measure of how much energy is devoted towards mining Bitcoins, and the network becomes more resilient to attack.
So if someone's listening to this and thinks they wanted to buy Bitcoin,
yeah,
how would you do it?
So I like to think of this. There's the easy way, and then there's the right way. You want to hear both? The easy way is to just link your bank. Go to Coinbase.com, link up your bank account or your credit card number. I think they take credit card, maybe your debit card, and then they might verify it after like a week, and then they'll let you start buying Bitcoins. You can also, a lot of places have Bitcoin ATMs now. There's, I think, a website called Coin ATM Radar, and you can look for ATMs in your area. Those are the main two ways. There's also a number of other exchanges. Coinbase is not really exchange. It's more like I guess they call it a broker.
Okay.
But there's exchanges like GDAX is an exchange owned by Coinbase. There's, back in 2013, when I got involved, there was only one exchange. It was called Mt. Gox, and it was extremely shady and poorly run. And in 2014, it collapsed and it took down the Bitcoin price with it. You might remember that.
I do. I was actually going to ask you about Mt. Gox. I had that.
Yeah, that was in 2014. Yeah. Nowadays, there's lots of exchanges. There's dozens of them across the world, but they still have a tendency to be hacked.
And so if they get hacked, so basically you were talking about public keys and private keys. Say I had a Coinbase account and just had Bitcoin in there. Could someone steal that?
If it's hacked, yes.
Okay.
I think Coinbase might be insured. I know Circle is another one, Circle.com. That's another competitor to Coinbase. I know for a fact they're insured. I think Coinbase is as well. But the thing is, when you use Coinbase, there's a few things you're giving up. First of all, when you store your money with them, they have your private keys. Coinbase is essentially a Bitcoin bank.
Okay.
And the idea behind Bitcoin was to cut out banks, to hold your money yourself. So regardless of whether or not you choose to use Coinbase, I highly recommend that if you buy Bitcoin through them, you move it out to a wallet that you control. Preferably, I think the best option right now is a hardware wallet. These are little devices. The one I use is called a Trezor, spelled Trezor. It connects to your computer. Takes just a few. It's very user friendly.
So like a USB connection.
Yeah, USB connection. It's actually fairly unhackable, in the sense that even if your computer has a virus and you plug it into your computer, the virus cannot spread to the Trezor.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it has this special kind of connection where the messages are only sent one way. Yeah. Okay. So it's very important to control your private keys yourself.
So now, if you had that Trezor, the hardware wallet, and you had money in Coinbase, how do you get it to the wallet? You have a public key you send it to, and it goes to the blockchain, and then it ends up there? Okay.
Yes, the public key is your address. And so what you do is like, so a lot of times the public key is manifested in the form of a QR code. So what the Trezor, the way it works is you plug into your computer, you go to their website, trezor.io. Well, first you set up the Trezor. There's a 24-word backup phrase where even if you lose your Trezor, you can if you buy another one, you can restore the entire balance on it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, it's great. So what you do is with your Coinbase app on your phone, you got your money on your Coinbase app. You scan the Trezor's QR code on your computer screen, which will pop up when you plug it into your computer and you go to trezor.io. You scan it and then you click send, and it'll send the Bitcoin there. And then you have to wait for the miners to include in the next block of transactions.
Right.
Which, of course, like I was saying, is dependent upon the tips.
And then it's a hardware wallet, almost like my wallet that has Federal Reserve notes in it in my back pocket. It's there. It's not connected to anything. No one can touch it. It's on the hardware. It's all on the hardware. Yep. So the cool thing about hardware wallets. So I'm going to. There's another. I don't want to act like I'm endorsing Trezor. There's another great company called Ledger. Trezor is just the one I use, but Ledger, Ledger, is another company. There's another company called KeepKey. And there's a fourth company, I don't know much about them, called Case Wallet. Trezor and Ledger are the most well-known ones. KeepKey is a little newer. I don't know much about Case Wallet at all. But Trezor is fully open source. People have examined, just like Bitcoin itself, people have examined the source code to make sure there's no backdoors and no bugs. But the cool thing about Trezor is, when you plug it in, what you'll do is you have a little a PIN number, anywhere between I guess 1 and 6 digits. And unless you have that PIN number, you can't really access it. And the cool thing about it is that if somebody stole your Trezor and then they try to brute force the PIN number, every time they got the PIN number wrong, the amount of time they had to wait until they put the PIN number in again doubles. And you can remember, this is 6 digits, up to 6 digits. That's great. So you could guess random numbers all day.
Yeah. Oh, if you do the math and you get it wrong 30 times, they'll eventually have to wait a year to try again.
Oh, Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So it,
So don't
Yeah.
lose your pin.
yeah. Well, I mean, mine's just memorized.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
Exactly. And then even if you lose the treasure itself, or it's stolen, you can restore the entire balance. You remembering a 24-word passphrase. So the hardware wallet to me is the best way of storing Bitcoins yourself. I mean, I think most any professional would agree. There are other ways you could memorize the passphrase yourself, and that's called a brain wallet. Even without a hardware device, I highly recommend against using a brain wallet because if you forget it, it's gone.
It's gone forever.
There's also there's even paper wallets where if you go to this website called Bitcoin paper, I think it's paperwallet.com or bitcoinpaperwallet.com, you can print out these paper wallets and then you can scan them and send money there. The reason why I used to use that, but I've switched away from that method recently. The reason why I advise against it is because if that paper wallet is or your printer is compromised, or if you print it on a public printer, the printers actually keep memory of the things they've printed. So if anybody gets access to that, it's gone. They can take it. The important thing with the private keys is that you have to keep them safe because if you lose the private keys, and you don't have like a backup like the passphrase, it's all your money's gone. And B, if somebody else gets access to the private key, they can take all the money. So the private key is really the key to the Bitcoins.
Right.
That's the most valuable thing in it.
So
so you're saying, go ahead.
No, you finish what you're saying.
So you're saying so I was talking about the right way versus the best way to get Bitcoin, or the easy way versus the best way. So I was Coinbase, ATMs, and so forth. These are the easy way, but the best way to me is to, if you value privacy, in terms of anybody tracking your Bitcoin or your identity, tying your identity to your Bitcoins, the best way to me is just to go to your ATM, withdraw some money, and then go to localbitcoins.com and find a local dealer, meet them at a coffee shop, and buy Bitcoins from there. It's as simple. You hand them the cash.
It's as anonymous as it gets, huh?
Pretty much, yeah. I think it's the best way. I mean, because one thing about the blockchain is it's a public file, so technically there's no identities on the blockchain per se. All the public keys, like I was saying, the addresses, these are all they're all just a string of numbers. But looking at the blockchain, you can trace transactions between this address to that address to this address. You can see the route it's like imagine if I gave you $1 and then you gave it to somebody else. Imagine you could trace the route of that dollar across the economy.
Right.
The blockchain is public, so if they can tie your identity to a particular public address, then they can see the trail of transactions henceforth.
Right.
So it is a public file. Now having said that, there are upgrades coming in the works to improve the privacy of transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain. And there are altcoins that do have some level of privacy built in. The best one that is called Monero, Monero, which is an altcoin. Uses something called ring signatures. I don't know much about the tech behind ring signatures, but it's supposed to obfuscate the trail of transactions.
Yeah, I know that is one of the big misconceptions about Bitcoin is everyone says, "Oh, it's completely anonymous," and it's like, yes and no. It's not correct to really say that. It is all public.
Yeah, the best example is the Silk Road trial, where Ross Ulbricht, who was accused of being Dread Pirate Roberts, the operative of Silk Road, the prosecutors brought evidence, and they basically had like this, this chart up in front of the courtroom where they were like, okay, this Bitcoin went from here to here to here, and that's how it made its way to Ross. So they actually brought that in as evidence. So it's not a private chain. There are private chains, but the Bitcoin core team is working on privacy enhancing upgrades. So one of the core developers named Greg Maxwell, who works at a company called Blockstream, he he is proposing something called confidential transactions, which would be an upgrade to the Bitcoin network that would improve privacy.
Nice.
So hopefully we'll get that someday. But like all things, there's a trade-off. It will increase confidential transactions. Will increase the size in terms of the data of transactions, which does mean that it contributes more data to the blockchain, makes the blockchain grow faster, makes it more expensive to run a node, and probably transactions that utilize confidential transactions will probably be more expensive because there's a trade-off there, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, nothing's for free.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if you're gonna get more out of the Bitcoin, then it makes sense that you would pay more for it.
Yeah, in fact, Monero, the transaction sizes in the Monero are larger than Bitcoin, so it is a less scalable system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I guess changing gears a little bit. What exactly is Bitcoin good for? I know we can, you can pay for stuff with it. I know the first thing was the first transaction when someone bought a pizza, and I guess you could even buy something like a tractor.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, will this replace U.S. dollars or any dollars for that matter, euros, or is there a possibility it will? What do you think the future is? What is Bitcoin good for?
This is probably a matter of opinion, and I feel like the Bitcoin community's opinion on this has shifted over the years. Like, if you asked this question, 3-4 years ago when I first got involved, everybody was excited. There used to be a headline every once in a while. What is it? Microsoft starts accepting Bitcoin, at their online store. Who are the other ones? Overstock.com, Expedia. But the thing is, people weren't spending Bitcoins because they thought the price would go up. So, why would you want to spend something that's going to be worth, twice as much in a year?
Right.
Frankly, I don't think that as a consumer retail option, it's a good idea. And it's a few reasons. A, people expect the price to go up, so they don't want to spend it. They want to hold it. Or what we call, in the community, we call ourselves hodlers. It's a misspelling of holding
Gotcha.
Bitcoins. Yeah, it's a joke that we have amongst ourselves. A lot of Bitcoin scholars are hodlers. But another reason why is because Bitcoin, there's a trade-off here. We've built a system that's resistant to censorship, and as a result, it's kind of more expensive because if you think about it, like I was saying in my early example, when you use PayPal or a credit card or something, you're using a direct transfer between two parties. But Bitcoin is a broadcast medium where all these nodes and all these miners, some of which may be adversarial to the network as a whole, have to come into consensus. And that consensus process is not cheap. It's actually very, very inefficient and very, very expensive. So it's not a very good way to transact for your daily. The example we all use is your daily coffee. I don't think it's smart to send Bitcoin to buy your daily Starbucks coffee because it's right now the fees are expensive, and as I think they're only going to keep going up. It's perfectly natural. So the places that Bitcoin has traditionally found success has been in the underground economy because it's used for regulatory arbitrage. So we all know about the Silk Road, and even since the Silk Road has been shut down, that has not stopped the darknet market movement. So the biggest one right now is called Alpha Bay. There's another one called Dream Market, but they're doing several multiples more volume than even Silk Road at its peak.
And I'm guessing they learned from the Silk Road experience and probably improved their security around everything.
Yep, they call it OPSEC. And if you want to delve into that world, it's so fascinating. Go to Reddit Darknet Markets. You can.
I've been there. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, those guys, they review drugs and all that stuff. So that's one of the primary use cases that has taken off. Another use case is Backpage.com, which is a site where a lot of escorts advertise their services. About a year, 2 years ago, I think the city of Chicago began putting pressure on credit card companies like Amex and Visa to withdraw their processing transactions for Backpage. So when that happened, they turned to Bitcoin as the way for the escorts to pay for their ads. A lot of the online gambling sites have basically turned over to Bitcoin because of the difficulty in doing bank transfers. Like nitrogensports.eu is one well-known gambling site. And then there's other things which it's kind of hard to tell, but I mean, I think that hiding your assets from the government, from the legal system, in the cases of, I don't know, things like divorces or, other settlements or lawsuits against you, that's another use case. Some people like Bitcoin because it's a fixed monetary supply. If you're hardcore against the Fed, and their inflation of the money supply, then Bitcoin has a very fixed supply. There will never be more than 21 billion Bitcoins, and it's a predictable supply where you know exactly how many Bitcoins are issued every 10 minutes. And then, of course, as it's a secure store of value, as long as you control your private keys and nobody else accesses them, nobody can steal your Bitcoin. That's like guaranteed. Not even the most powerful government on earth, without the private keys, they're not going to be able to get your money. So, I mean, those are the use cases to me. They all strike me as essentially regulatory arbitrage, evading the government. That's, I think, why most libertarians like it on some level, allows them to route around government regulations.
Absolutely. And I think I'm one of your hodlers because I have a little bit of Bitcoin and it's just there as a kind of a hedge.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm guessing you don't spend it on a day-to-day basis.
Nope.
Yeah. And this is essentially gotten to the heart of what this Bitcoin civil war is about. I mean, have you heard much about this?
I see it, like on Twitter, people arguing back and forth about it, but it mostly goes right over my head.
Yeah, I mean, it's technical. It's technical, but so it's essentially Bitcoin Core is one side of the debate, and then the other side is what's constantly shifting. The current iteration, it's a competing implementation, competing with Bitcoin Core. Currently, it's called Bitcoin Unlimited, but there were two prior attempts: Bitcoin XT and Bitcoin Classic. And maybe some people that were involved might ring a bell. One of them is Gavin Andreessen, who was formerly the head of Bitcoin Core. He was essentially the heir to Satoshi, but he was the public face of Bitcoin for a number of years, especially after Satoshi left and wasn't heard from after December 2010. Gavin was the face of the project. There's another person who holds a lot of Bitcoins named Roger Ver. Mm-hmm. And then also the head of the largest mining pool, and also the head of a company that manufactures the most of those ASIC mining computers. His name is Jihan Wu, and his company is called Antpool. His mining pool is called Antpool. They're basically the most prominent supporters of raising the block size. So right now, the Bitcoin that block of transactions that settles every 10 minutes, it's capped at 1 megabyte. So this group of people, led by those individuals, they want to raise the block size cap. In essence, include more transactions, because they believe that Bitcoin is getting too expensive. Like I was saying, a few years ago you could transact for free or just a few pennies, and now you essentially need to pay $3 to $5 to get a transaction on average, to get a transaction included into the blockchain. They want to raise that cap. I mean, initially they proposed raising it from 1 megabyte to 20 megabytes, and now they kind of came downwards. Bitcoin Classic, that was what Bitcoin XT was, 20 megabytes. Then Bitcoin Classic was like, okay, we'll do 2 megabytes. And now they've sort of flipped back to the direction. And Bitcoin Limited is to get rid of the cap entirely. Bitcoin Core, which of course comprises most of the very technical individuals that have written most of the code, or essentially rewritten most of the code, because most of the code has been rewritten since Satoshi left the project. They believe that you have to be much more judicious, because there's a trade-off involved here, where as you raise the block size cap, you're essentially committing more data to the blockchain grows larger, it grows faster, and there will be fewer validating nodes. And I tend to agree with this assessment, that as there's fewer validating nodes, eventually, I mean, where does it end? Where, if we start having, the number of nodes whittle away, and there's only a handful on the network, and they're run out of data centers, we've essentially regressed back to the status quo, to banking, to our existing system. And I mean, I think that's the greater danger in the long term, is that Bitcoin does not remain decentralized, that we lose that decentralization because we're continually raising the block size. So instead, what they've proposed is an upgrade to Bitcoin called segregated witness. It's sort of as a compromise. Segregated witness does raise the block size to it's kind of dependent on how transactions are formulated, but it's generally between 1.7 to 4 times the existing size. But it also solves another problem. It solves this very obtuse problem called transaction malleability, which basically has been complicating transactions for a number of years now. And what it does is, by fixing transaction malleability, it opens up to something called the Lightning Network. And the Lightning Network is really cool. It's kind of one of the most exciting developments in Bitcoin, where it essentially might allow for several orders of magnitude more scaling without that associated trade-off. So the way the Lightning Network works is essentially, imagine you and I go to a bar together, and when you go to a bar and you give your credit card to the bartender to start a bar tab, they don't charge you every time you buy a beer, right?
Right.
Yeah. They what they do
settle
is
up at the end of the night. Yeah.
Exactly. So what the Lightning Network is instead of committing every transaction to the blockchain every time, you can essentially open up a payment channel with somebody else, and after multiple transactions between you can commit the final total state of all those transactions to the blockchain itself. So essentially, say I open up a 10 Bitcoin payment channel with you, Rollo, and then I can transact with you up to 10 megabytes, and as many times as I'd like, and then we close the channel on the blockchain. Now, here's what's really cool. Suppose I have a channel open with you. I have a 10 Bitcoin channel open with you, and then separately you have a 10 Bitcoin channel open up with Slappy, but I don't have any channel open with Slappy. Through you, I can transact with Slappy. Essentially, what you're doing is you're acting as intermediary between the two of us. So what could theoretically emerge with this Lightning Network is that you could have an infinite number of intermediaries. So what you're essentially creating, and I don't know if you can visualize this, is a grid of people transacting amongst each other and only settling up transactions when they choose to do so.
That's interesting.
Nice. Yes. That really cheapens up the cost then, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you can kind of visualize in your head. It's kind of like a mesh network. So we're transacting amongst each other, and now you're probably asking, what is the benefit? What is the incentive for that intermediary to do so? And the answer is they can collect fees on top. So, Rollo, you're mediating transactions between me and Slappy. You can probably take a small cut, and really the cut will be determined by what the market is for it. I mean, some people think they might get rich off of being this intermediary, but because there's practically no barrier to entry to becoming a Lightning Network intermediary. I'll be, you might be an intermediary between me and Slappy, but I might be an intermediary between you and somebody else. And it goes on infinitely.
Right.
The price will, the Lightning Network creators have theorized that the price will probably be very, very minimal.
Yeah, it would basically be a wash.
Yeah, and also, I mean, people, you'll act as an intermediary, I'll act as an intermediary. We'll all be basically paying each other fees for doing so. And one cool thing is that in order to keep these channels, like I said, you can transact up to the size of the channel. In our example, 10 Bitcoins. You can also, in order to free up, say your channel's full, you can also, start transacting in the other direction. Does that make sense? To basically to free up more funds.
To reverse. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So in essence, you could go years without settling transactions on the blockchain. So Lightning Network is a very promising avenue for scaling. But first, we need segregated witness, and the reason why we need segregated witness is to fix that transaction malleability. And segregated witness, also called SegWit, fixes a number of things. It allows some of the operations that nodes do to validate transactions. It allows that fairly computationally expensive validation process to only scale linearly instead of right now it's quadratic in some cases. So it allows nodes to validate more easily. It improves some script versioning so that new features like confidential transactions can be added to future versions of Bitcoin.
Right.
It reduces the growth in the blockchain size by rebalancing how transactions are committed. And like I said, it also throws a bone to the big block crowd by actually increasing the block size capacity. But right now, just the debate, it's gotten so political and so heated that they're just the other side is blocking SegWit for very shifting reasons. Like their reasons change. Like sometimes they used to say that they're okay with SegWit, but they want to block size increase. And then they've changed and said, oh no, SegWit's bad. And they're also like changing why they think SegWit is bad. And then some of them even signed an agreement to allow SegWit, provided there's a hard fork afterwards. It's I mean, obviously I'm biased here, but I mean, I find that their reasoning very bizarre. And so you're probably, I mean, I think you'd asked me earlier about, you don't know, like the UASF thing you're hearing a lot about, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's essentially a movement to implement segregated witness over the objections of the people that are trying to block it. Because frankly, I think it's a very small but very vocal minority that opposes SegWit. So basically what they're doing is the way Bitcoin upgrades, soft forks, as Bitcoin Core is preferential to, the way they typically push them out to the network was they let the miners vote on them. And the way miners vote is they basically signal for, which is a glorified way of just putting a little message in their blocks and saying, hey, I support SegWit. Hey, I don't support SegWit. And Bitcoin Core, to me, has always conducted themselves in a very ethical manner. They said, we're not going to push SegWit out in the network until 95% of miners signal their support. Yeah.
It's got to be overwhelming, yeah.
I know. They said, hey, we want overwhelming consensus. The problem is, what they didn't anticipate this time was that a lot of the miners were going to come out, even though they had said to Bitcoin Core, hey, we support SegWit. And then after they pushed out the software, a lot of these miners just started changing their tune. They started blocking SegWit. Now, we can all theorize about what the ulterior motive is here. There was one kind of bombshell news uncovered where some of the miners, they were using a special optimization software called ASIC Boost. Remember that miner I was telling you about, Jihan Wu,
right,
who controls a lot of them? Yeah, he controls the largest mining pool. He controls the largest ASIC manufacturing. So Greg Maxwell, that same engineer at Blockstream, who is a member of Bitcoin Core, he actually bought one of their miners or something, and he reverse engineered it, and he found they were using a piece of software called ASIC Boost, which gives them basically an edge in mining, which to me is perfectly fine because mining is supposed to be a competitive environment where you're trying to eke out every efficiency in order to get competitive advantage, thereby increasing the amount of Bitcoin block rewards you win. But ASIC Boost is incompatible with SegWit. So as you can see, they might be blocking SegWit for that reason.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what's essentially occurring is that Jihan Wu and Antpool's incentives are not well aligned with the Bitcoin community as a whole.
Right.
So UASF. So the UASF is like, okay, fuck it. The miners are not going to activate it. What we're going to do is all the nodes, we're just going to upgrade to it, and on August 1st, we're going to do it. We're going to go ahead and push it out. Yeah. And so what may happen is, ironically, is if If the miners upgrade to segregated witness before then there will be no fork. But if they refuse to, then the blockchain will fork, and there will be 2 Bitcoins. But
so what happens then to someone who has Bitcoin? Where do they go?
nothing, nowhere. As long as you control your Bitcoins yourself, you control your private keys, then you will have what you essentially receive is, and so say you have 5 Bitcoins, you will have 5 SegWit Bitcoins, and you have 5 legacy Bitcoins. But the price of them might fall because the network of, because you're not having, you're having equal amounts of 2 separate networks.
Right.
But it might not come to that because so about a month ago there was a conference in New York run by Digital Currency Group, which is like a blockchain investment firm, and they basically went to all the Bitcoin companies and they got them to agree to a compromise where they will activate SegWit, and if there is a hard fork, like I don't know, a few months down the road. And so basically all the companies, including the ones that are theoretically opposing SegWit, have agreed to it, which again is like now bizarre because if they hated SegWit all along, why are they now suddenly agreeing to it? It's like it's one of numerous about faces they've done.
Right.
Yeah. So so as long as they agree to that and they follow through and do that software, they will have SegWit. As far as that hard fork goes in a few months, the hard fork to increase the block size, they can't really enforce that on the entire network. I mean, anybody who doesn't upgrade their node simply won't go along. So a lot of people think that a lot of this is just essentially a face-saving effort. Like a lot of these miners are, like I was saying, are Chinese, and in that culture, saving face is very important. Not admitting that you're wrong or that you failed in any way. So what might happen is that they just we'll get SegWit on August 1st. And then that hard fork will never happen, and then they'll just say, "Oh, we were misled," and they'll blame it on Bitcoin Core probably because that's what they always do. They blame Core for all their problems, and then we just go along as continue developing. So that's kind of what UASF. It's sort of just it's sort of like hey, we're not going to put up with it anymore. We're going to push for SegWit now. We're not going to,
So you're basically just giving certain people a pillow to cry on, and they get over it. And
yeah, I mean, it's sort of just holding a metaphorical gun to the miners and saying, "Hey, we're gonna fucking do this, and we're not gonna wait around for you anymore."
Right.
We're gonna push SegWit through, and if you don't want to go along and you don't want to upgrade, fine, but we're gonna have SegWit and you won't. And we think that a SegWit Bitcoin is a much more useful Bitcoin because it has things like Lightning Network.
Right.
It'll have confidential transactions. It'll be a better Bitcoin, and so it'll be a more valuable one. And eventually
everyone will go over to it. Yeah, it'll happen eventually.
Yeah, but the important thing to remember for anybody, like I've always say, is control your own Bitcoins. If you keep it on Coinbase, get the hell out of Coinbase and move it to a wallet, a hardware wallet, or if not, a paper wallet you can print off on your computer. But move it to your own private keys. And then after August 1st, I would for a period after that, maybe until the whole thing blows over, and it might blow over really fast, and it might be a whole lot of nothing. Bitcoin had a long history of panicking about something, and then it turned out to be a lot of nothing because I guess Bitcoiners worry a lot. Just hold on to your Bitcoins and don't touch them, and just hold and control your own private keys, and nothing will happen to you. You won't lose a dime. I mean, I won't know how the price itself fluctuates, but you will not lose any Bitcoins as long as you control the private keys. That's guaranteed. You might have 2 Bitcoins, but that's the worst case scenario.
Right.
Okay, so that was Dr. Vivek Raj, our Bitcoin expert, who did an excellent job explaining Bitcoin to anyone who has questions. We're going to have his Twitter linked on the show notes page, and you can contact him directly. We also went a little longer than we typically do, so we're chopping this up into 2 episodes. So you get the first half this week, and we'll put the second half out next week. Check it out. It's good stuff. And I know, like we said, Rollo said, and I said, we own Bitcoin. We believe in it. We think it's pretty cool. But if you have any questions, contact us or contact the doctor directly.
Absolutely. Show notes page for this episode will be mcflugel.com/46. So yeah, again, I will have Vivek's Twitter handle there to follow him and talk to him. He's got a ton of knowledge and he's a pretty cool guy. I've talked to him a lot on Twitter before, so it was actually great to talk to him like we did here. And also, you'll be able to find links to subscribe to the podcast, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter, and also sign up on our email list. I don't know. We didn't do the free market success story, but I think this whole episode is basically
it's a free market success story. Yeah. Yeah. So let's keep it as it is.
Yeah. So, with that, we'll be sure to check us out next week for the second half of this episode. It gets pretty good. We go off on other tangents, talking a lot about the altcoins and other issues going on with Bitcoin. So it's good stuff. Thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you. We'll catch you next week. Peace.